So the Barbie movie finally released, and as expected, it was a huge success at the box office its opening weekend, after being seriously hyped for months, with an admittedly very aggressive but also very fun marketing campaign. Unfortunately, pretty much all of the rumors that I'd heard before the movie came out were true, along with basically everything I was speculating. Even the stuff about Midge. I hate it when I'm right. So Barbie Land is a matriarchy where all the Kens are second-class citizens, but they go to the real world and discover it's a patriarchy, so Ken tries to forcibly take over Barbie Land. And the movie being rated PG-13 means there's a lot of weird stuff that isn't appropriate for children. Oh boy, it's Transformers all over again. Admittedly, it wasn't as egregious as Transformers. Nothing like that scene. I don't think I'll ever understand Hollywood directors taking child-friendly properties based off of toys and making them weird. Why can't they just make these movies fun for everyone? And they did my girl Midge dirty. Like I figured, she's just there to be pregnant and for them to point and say how weird it is. She doesn't even have any lines. Why'd they give her a poster? And for some reason, instead of living in the Happy Family smart home, she hangs around Skipper's treehouse, which is really weird. The doll that was accused of promoting teenage pregnancy is hanging around a teenager? Go home, Midge. And there's no sign of Happy Family Alan. They also keep claiming that she was discontinued, but for some reason isn't with the other discontinued dolls. Also, she wasn't actually discontinued, she was just repackaged. The doll itself was a regular doll, but it had a belly that could magnetically attach to it, and a tiny baby doll inside that belly. But after people complained, they just removed the belly and also added Ryan and Alan to the background. That way people could know that she was a married woman and not a pregnant teen. My point is, I really don't like how they treated Midge. She did not deserve that. Before I continue, I want to give a spoiler warning. This is a spoiler review and I'm going to be going in depth on the ending because I found it kind of confusing and weird. But before I get to my main talking points, I do want to go over what I enjoyed about the film. First of all, everybody knows the sets are amazing. The costume designs, the fact that the sets were actually practical and not just CGI. There was clearly a lot of talent and passion that went into this production. There were a lot of recognizable and accurate references to the doll line, and even stuff that was created specifically for the film was very reminiscent of the doll line, and I can't praise that aspect of the film enough. I also thought it was sweet that the dolls could see the memories of the people who were playing with them, even if I'm not a huge fan of reverse isekais. Now for everything else. First of all, this film basically glorifies Ruth Handler, which I don't particularly care for. I think there are things to be admired about her, but to put her on this pedestal like they did, I don't think so. The film also feels like it's not sure what it really wants to be. It's like this over-the-top goofy comedy, but also tries to be taken seriously, like with that scene with Ruth Handler. And this results in a clash that causes the film to pull in different directions. I found it to be tonally confused. Among other issues, this movie isn't really about Barbie as a character, but more about Barbie as a concept, how popular culture views her. But it just feels like they kind of forgot to let Barbie be Barbie, and they were more caught up with addressing all the criticism she's ever received.
I'm so grateful that I didn't grow up with Barbie, thank God. Barbie was everything we didn't want to be, and we're being told to be.
Barbie is a very thin woman with proportions that don't exist in reality, and a white blonde woman, and we were told this is the ideal of beauty.
Barbie is the epitome of gender. I mean, who could be more feminine in a sexist sort of a way than Barbie?
Millions of girls will grow up thinking that this is the right way to act, that they can never be anything more than vacuous ninnies whose only goal is to look pretty and have a rich husband.
And I feel like they could have made a movie that was meta and a satire while still being true to the character. The movie starts out with a parody of 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, where we're told that there was only baby dolls before Barbie and she was the first fashion doll, something that Mattel has been claiming for a long time now in documentaries and books and now here. I made a whole video debunking this claim. It's honestly my favorite video I've ever done, and I'd appreciate if you give it a watch if you haven't seen it already. There's a lot of really interesting history that Mattel is basically trying to erase. But back to the film. We're then taken to Barbie Land, a place that's visually stunning, but I would argue misses the point of Barbie. Barbie Land, where all the dolls live, works similarly to Life in the Dream House, the web series. They know they're dolls, it's very meta, and there's a bunch of references. Obviously the world revolves around Barbie, it is the Barbie franchise, so it's very pink and saccharine, and that's not a bad thing, but it all feels kind of surface level. Like it's more what people think of of when they think of Barbie. She's pink, she's feminine, she's the embodiment of consumerism, things like that. So it felt more like they were going off of stereotypes. The main character is even called stereotypical Barbie, not classic or Malibu, just stereotypical. Meanwhile, there's a long-running joke in Stereotype that Ken is just an accessory rather than character in his own right, and the movie plays into that by basically having the Kens exist and not actually do anything. They don't have jobs, homes, cars, prospects in general. They're just there to pine after Barbie, who don't seem to care that they exist at all. Stereotypical Barbie even says that they're superfluous, but that's not who Barbie is. She's kind and caring. She would never write someone else off. Even Raquel, who actively hates her, she actively tries to steal Barbie's spotlight and make her look bad. Barbie knows this and she doesn't let her get away with it, but she still cares about Raquel and wants her to be happy. The only reason why they're frenemies is because Barbie is so nice. And not that fake kind of nice that people assume about Barbie. Not to mention, while there are references to the doll lines, they refuse to acknowledge that Ken often comes with jobs. Sure, he hasn't had as many jobs as Barbie. She is still the main character, but still, he's been a doctor, an astronaut, a sports star, among many others. There's even a point where Barbie sees a merman version of Ken and is weirded out by it, which is weird because there are merman dolls of Ken, both playline and collector. I don't know, I just wish it had reflected the dolls more. Barbie has had a lot of accusations thrown against her basically since she was revealed in 1959.
Barbie is this icon that we have in our toy box. Mattel perpetuated this image and has done so for decades and unapologetically done so.
Mattel has tried to combat these claims for quite a while. It's one of the reasons why she has so many careers to begin with, to show how the character is career driven. Except the film follows stereotypical Barbie, who kinda seems to be everything she is being accused of. She lacks confidence even before her existential crisis, constantly comparing herself to the other Barbies and asking what would a smart Barbie do, because stereotypical Barbie is just what everyone thinks of when they think of Barbie, and it kinda comes off like the film is saying that the stereotypes about Barbie are true. Barbie can be anything, but only the Barbies that actually have careers, but that stereotypical Barbie is still just a pretty face with not much else going on. Like, she'll make these statements and everybody cheers, but then she's shocked that she was able to make that kind of statement, because she's not a smart Barbie. But she starts having thoughts about her own mortality and gets cellulite and flat feet, so she has to go on a journey to the real world to find whoever's playing with her and hopefully set things right. But the real world ends up being pretty horrible, and Barbie pretty much has no positive experiences there. It's a raging patriarchy where she's constantly being objectified and harassed. Ken, on the other hand, is having a great time, although people are also mostly mean to him, finding him annoying and weird. But one lady asked him what time it was, and he got so excited because no one's asked anything of him before. So he ends up loving the patriarchy, but something about this just feels kind of forced. Back in Barbie Land, he and the other Kens are kind of portrayed as incels. They're all desperate for their Barbie's attention. Like in the dance scene, stereotypical Ken spends a lot of it just glaring at Barbie. He's super jealous because other Kens are talking to her, and it doesn't seem like any of the Barbies and Kens are actually together. Like, the Kens are mostly just tolerated. I would have really liked to see a Barbie and Ken power couple, instead of this awkward and aggressive incel narrative. So Ken becomes totally enamored with the idea of the patriarchy, and everything I speculated about that doctor scene ended up being true. Ken tries to get a job based solely on the fact that he's a man, but he's shut down because he doesn't have the credentials to be a doctor, and gets even more disappointed when he finds he can't get any job just for being a man. So he decides to go back to Barbie Land and take over, to make it a patriarchy, except it's basically what Barbie Land was already doing, but in reverse, where now all the Barbies are being subjugated instead of the Kens, which is all pretty extreme. The real world was never this bad. I know people are going to say that it's just a satire and not to take it seriously, but the film clearly does want to be taken seriously, and I don't think you can have it both ways. Barbie ends up having an existential crisis and gives up, so the humans she brought with her decide to go back home, but Alan tags along, which is kind of random because he hadn't been a character up until that point, but he says he doesn't want to sit on leather couches anymore. I kind of feel like they could have worked a little bit harder on his motivation. But the daughter, who has been hating on Barbie this entire time, insists that they go back to save Barbie Land, which was also kind of out of nowhere. Nothing really feels natural, characters just flip on a dime, or just show up out of nowhere. So they go back and deprogram all the Barbies with a speech about how hard it is to be a woman, which none of the Barbies should actually be able to relate to since their life has been nothing but privilege. And while there are a lot of double standards with society, some of the things she said was just kind of basic manners, like you can never be rude and that's annoying, but yeah, that's not really specific to women. You shouldn't be rude just because it's rude. I mean, everybody gets frustrated and wants to say certain things that they shouldn't, regardless of gender. I just don't know if this is the best attitude. I also didn't really like how everything that was considered masculine was also considered negative. Here they kind of act like it's okay for women to like feminine stuff and men to like feminine stuff, but not really for anyone to like masculine stuff. Like they make jabs at The Godfather and rock music. Also, Ken assumed that horses were a part of the patriarchy, so there's a huge horse aesthetic everywhere, and the Barbies are disgusted by it. Seriously? None of them are horse girls? There are a lot of Barbie horse toys, so I'm not really sure what happened there, but I think it's weird that a lot of the actors were talking about how this was going to destroy gender norms, but the only thing that the Barbies are able to interact with that's masculine is male-dominated careers, but all masculine interests are basically just seen as part of the patriarchy and lack value. Like if any of the Barbies said that they weren't familiar with this music but liked it and wanted to add some songs to their playlist, they would have been accused of still being brainwashed. But you can like something even if you're not in its target audience. It's just that given all the interviews, this movie was a lot more stereotypical than I was expecting. Just saying. After they defeat the Kendom, they decide that instead of going back to the way things were, they will give the Kens some jobs. Although I don't remember them saying anything about housing, but they say eventually the Kens will have as much power as women do in the real world. Yes, thank you, WB, I'm very inspired. Although I don't think they still get to have masculine interests, and apparently that means no horses in Barbie Land? Weird. Then there were all the Mattel executives. Honestly, I forgot they were there a lot of the time. They just kind of showed up every once in a while, so I don't really feel like they contributed that much. Honestly, I preferred Will Ferrell as President Business in the Lego movie. They were also really cartoony and over the top, to the point where it made the real world feel not that much different from Barbie Land. They make a lot of jokes at Mattel's expense, but it all felt kind of surface level. There are a lot of reasons to criticize Mattel, but they just say that there are too many men in positions of power, and they're part of the patriarchy. Meanwhile, a lot of the shady stuff that Mattel has done just kind of gets swept under the rug. Like when Ruth Handler does show up, they make a joke about the IRS thing, but other than that, they basically treat her like this sweet, wholesome figure who works out of her kitchen and had the best of intentions, while not mentioning Bill Lilly at all. I'm probably getting ahead of myself. I do think that Handler has a lot to be praised for, but she was also pretty ruthless. No pun intended. First of all, calling her the inventor of Barbie is, I guess, accurate, but they leave out the part where she all but stole from another company. I discussed this in my previous video, but I also want to correct the record. Build is the magazine that published the Lily comics. However, they contracted a toy company called Hauser to make the Lily dolls. I guess I got the companies confused because all the stands say Build Lily, but the company that Mattel forced out of business was Hauser and not Build. My bad. Anyway, while on a family vacation, the Handlers came across the Build Lily doll. They bought a few and took them back to America, where they more or less copied the design to make Barbie. And even those extremely biased documentaries admit that they basically copied her.
They copied her exactly like the German one.
Barbie was a huge success that catapulted Mattel into being a juggernaut of the toy industry, and they were concerned about who they had to crush to get there. Hauser tried to sue them for copyright infringement, but the courts sided with Mattel, and Hauser was forced to close, leading to this heartbreaking statement by the owner at that time. Now whenever Lily does come up, she just gets accused of being a call girl who seduces men for money.
Who also happened to be a call girl.
She was actually an office worker. They just take a bunch of her comics out of context. Like this one here. I know this looks bad, but what's actually going on in this comic is that she went to the beach, but then remembered that she was out of vacation days. So to avoid being late, she rushes over to the office while still wearing her bikini. That's why she's dressed this way. The comics were intended for an adult audience, but it's nothing like they portray it as. She was just sassy and flirty. I'm not really sure why Mattel decided that the narrative of, sure, Barbie was based off of another doll, but that doll was a sex toy anyway, is a good look for Barbie. But I guess history is written by the victors, and this is what they went with.
Let's embrace our squalid ancestor, Lily. What could be more quintessentially American than having an embarrassing forebear in Europe?
Ruth Handler also actively erases her contemporaries to make herself look better, claiming there was no other businesswoman like her, erasing people that I talked about like Jenny Graves, Nancy Ann Abbott, and Madame Alexander.
How would you describe yourself?
Gutsy. I always kind of considered myself a fluke because there were no others like me.
Mrs. Graves, here on the left, believed dolls should be small enough for children to handle, should be more lifelike, and should be easy for children to dress in clothing like that the children wear themselves. One woman's love for sewing, her need to support her family, and her conviction that she had a worthwhile idea all combined to produce a multi-million-dollar business and enough dolls to provide one for every fourth little girl in the United States.
They were all very inspirational, but they've mostly been forgotten, and a big factor in that was Mattel's narrative. They do reference how the IRS made her step down from the company because of tax fraud, but it comes off like a joke that they're sweeping under the rug. Basically, I'm not a huge fan of Ruth Handler. I can understand why a Barbie movie would elevate her, but I still find it annoying. Anyway, I should probably get back to the movie. Sorry for the tangent. She and Barbie have a heart-to-heart, where Barbie decides that she's tired of her fake plastic life and wants to be real, so she asks Ruth to grant her humanity. But Ruth says she doesn't need permission and she can just feel and become human. So she becomes human and goes to live in the real world. This felt like it came out of nowhere. Barbie had no positive experiences in the real world. She was constantly being harassed, talked down to, and insulted, and she got arrested multiple times. And it seemed like she wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. She did have an existential crisis, but that wasn't really because she felt that her world was fake and plastic, but because she had this worldview that Barbie fixed the real world and going there shattered that vision. Plus the Kens turning Barbie land into a dude ranch. I could understand if she wanted to make the world a better place, but to just jump into her becoming human seemed like a stretch. I also feel like she didn't contribute that much to the ending. It was basically all President Barbie who made the decrees, while stereotypical Barbie was just kinda there. And even she admits that liberating Barbie land from the patriarchy was a group effort. I actually think Ken had a more complete character arc, and maybe it would have made more sense for him to become human. That way he can work to improve himself and maybe go to college to get one of those jobs he was trying to get before, but this time with actual work and effort put into it. But I don't really think either of them needed to be human. Maybe they'd set it up that way, but as is, it just kind of felt random, in my opinion anyway. So that was the Barbie movie. It was everything I thought it would be, and honestly hoped it wouldn't be. But hey, it worked out great for the studio, so I wouldn't be surprised if they crank out more of these. I just think it would have been cooler if they had focused more on Barbie instead of the narrative around her. Even though I'm not a huge fan of how Barbie came to be, I still think she herself is pretty cool. And they could have addressed the criticisms by just having Barbie be herself. Instead it got really caught up in the message to the point where things were just happening for the sake of the message rather than it being natural. And I think that made it confused, maybe even a little desperate. The sets and costuming are phenomenal, but it ends up kind of overshadowing the rest of the film because the writing was kind of weak in comparison, not to mention all the corporate propaganda. I did not care for that, but that's just my opinion. What did you guys think of the Barbie movie? Did you like it the way it was? Or would you have preferred they focus on her actual character like me? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Stutania, Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Soundboy00, Owen Wildish, Player Zero, Kitsune Fiora, Lucas Geist, Dana Dine Executive, Jade Draws, Ninja Rex, Blue Spirit, Bandito Bane, Lil, Meowsers, Sky, Jinkays E, and Philip. Thank you all so much for your support. If you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content. And that part's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. It's linked in the description. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.